Ladies and gentlemen, let's start this information session. May I invite all the distinguished delegates to kindly take their seats. This information session will comprise of two segments. I'll start with the panelists that I'm going to present in a few seconds. Intervention from the panel members, following by Q&As. We have 75 minutes, so we're going to be very mindful of the time management. So let me start by presenting the panelists. Starting with Mr. Phongsaysack Inthalath, who chairs the Senior Labor Official in the ASEAN and is also Director General of the Department of Labor Management in the Ministry of Labor in Laos PDR. I have in our far right Dr. Omar Alnuaimi, who is Assistant Undersecretary for Commission and International Relations in the Ministry of Human Resources and Emiratization in the UAE, United Arab Emirates. And on our far left, Dr. Jureidini, Professor and Research Director in the area of Migration, Ethics, and Human Rights with the Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics at the Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha. I'm going to, obviously, most of you know our colleague Michelle Layton, and the Director of the Department of Migration. Michelle will start with a PowerPoint presentation. Then we'll hear also from our distinguished panel members. So without any transition, let me pass the floor to Michelle. Michelle, you have the floor.
Thank you. And if I could ask that the PowerPoint be brought up on the screen, please. From our technical people, thank you very much. Well, as many of you know, migration remains at the top of the agenda for most countries and a high priority, of course, for many ILO constituents in this region. And there are good reasons. We know that migration today, and in fact human mobility, is now at unprecedented levels since World War II. The flows are larger than in any time in history. We have 244 million migrants, but we also have 65 million refugees and displaced. We've identified now at ILO that there are also 150 million migrant workers. The migration flows are different today than they have been in the past, but not because of numbers, more because of the volume that's increased in certain corridors. We know, for instance, that these patterns are changing in the Arab states and between Asia and the Arab states quite rapidly. Since 1990, roughly, the number of migrants has tripled from 11 million to over 32 million. And of these, those coming from South and Southeast Asia has grown 3 times in volume to 19 million migrants. And ILO data now show that the Arab states host 17.8 million migrant workers, which is about 12% of the global total. But intra-regional mobility is also one of the fastest growing trends. And ILO data has shown that here in Asia, 17.2% of all migrant workers are hosted. As the DDG had mentioned, this is growing in the ASEAN region, and now most of those migrants come in ASEAN from other ASEAN countries. So we have these phenomena that are changing. We know that migration has helped many in the international community, we recognize that migration has produced a great deal of benefits. It's increased and multiplied the earnings of migrants, builds their skills, helps them to contribute to development of their families, to their host communities, and to their home communities. But these benefits, we know, are not shared equally, and certainly not by all. What starts out as a journey of hope too often exacts enormous costs and investment, and particularly for those in the low-skilled areas. Migrant workers, and particularly in this region, we know face significant decent work deficits. And a number of factors contribute to that. It starts with the high cost that migrants have to pay for their jobs. This exposes them to exploitation, and it often starts at the recruitment stage. This is a consequence of how recruitment is managed, regulated, and monitored, or not. The ILO and the World Bank have been investigating this phenomenon and looked at various corridors, and we have found some startling results. And I show you some of these only as representative samples on the screen, but you can see that Pakistanis, for instance, going to Saudi Arabia pay enormous costs, much more than others. But even in the same corridors, you can see, for instance, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh going to Kuwait. Bangladeshis pay 10 times the amount in recruitment fees. We see this tracking actually across sectors as well, and this is an example of the construction sector where there are varied results. We also find that recruitment fees are not the only costs. In fact, recruitment can lead to other phenomena, and that is deficiencies in working conditions. Our data are showing 77% report that they are not given the wages or they're lower wages than promised. 30% don't have a contract. 25% are not given any rest periods. And we know that this is costing about 30% of migrants' earnings, 27% of actual earnings, in affecting their ability to send remittances home and their own development. This is one of the reasons why ILO has adopted a fair recruitment initiative. We have found that, in fact, one of the great deficits is the lack of coordination between sending and receiving countries and the lack of cooperation in oversight mechanisms. This is also one of the reasons our tripartite constituents in September adopted the first general principles and operational guidelines on recruitment. These, for the first time, bring together all of ILO's existing standards and good practices in one resource guide. They apply to recruitment of both nationals and to recruitment of migrant workers. And I'm going to provide just an overview of these principles and guidelines. They are non-binding, but they do provide very concrete measures to address growing recruitment abuses. They have identified certain core definitions that will be important to informing the debate, and they identify a set of core principles, 13 of them, and 31 operational guidelines. They call fundamentally for recruitment to take place in a manner that fulfills human rights and also international labor standards with protection, in particular, of fundamental principles and rights at work. They outline actions to prevent fraudulent recruitment, including those that lead to forced labor and trafficking, and these rely on worker contracts, labor inspection, the use of standardized registration, licensing, and certification schemes. A primary principle underscoring the ILO standards and these guidelines are that no recruitment fee should be charged to the worker or the job seeker. The experts have called for eliminating the still persistent practice, and unfortunately in this region as well, where too many countries are allowing recruitment fees to be charged to workers. The operational guidelines identify then specific responsibilities of all of the key actors that play a role in the recruitment process. This gives an idea of those categories by which the guidelines are set out. And this is an attempt to ensure that there are no gaps in regulation of recruitment. This covers all aspects of the recruitment process. Governments have a primary role to establish laws and legislation that would be comprehensive and that would include licensing and inspection, prevention of retaliation against whistleblowers, grievance procedures, and setting requirements for standardized contracts, as well as access to free and accurate information about the recruitment process. Government should also foster cooperation between sending and receiving countries, because this is the key means by which the exploitation going on across borders for migrant workers takes place, and we need to close those gaps. In addition to their regulatory function, governments play a role with public employment services. So the guidelines set out requirements for public employment services and enterprises. They are required to undertake, for example, due diligence assessments regarding their recruitment activities to ensure that their operations, those of their partners, and those in their supply chains respect human rights and international standards. And as intermediaries, labor recruiters play a key role, and so there is a section dedicated to them. They too must ensure that fees are not charged to workers and that these are determined between employers and the recruiters themselves. The guidelines specify certain responsibilities, such as their requirement to assure freedom from harassment, deception, and coercion, that workers get legally recognized contracts and obtain the jobs, the living and working conditions that they have been promised. Labor recruiters also include temporary employment agencies and user enterprises, and they too should delineate their responsibilities. And then employers play, of course, a special role because those are where the workers are placed, and they should ensure that there are written contracts, regardless of what labor recruiters or governments do. Their responsibility is to ensure that they have transparent conditions of employment, they do give access to grievance procedures, they respect the right to freedom of association and collective bargaining, and they do not resort to labor recruiters to replace workers on strike. Moreover, they shouldn't withhold identity documents, and workers should be allowed to terminate or change their employment. The governing body has now authorized us to disseminate these and use these as a basis on which to do our technical cooperation programs, and we are. In fact, you can see from the slide doing just that, working across this region, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, South Asia, Arab states, and we have 2 global programs now supporting this work, directly with member states, employers, and workers' organizations to look at innovations that can bring life to these guidelines. These will be shared next week during the Global Forum on Migration and Development, which has a special roundtable on reducing labor migration costs, and this includes recruitment. And ILO has been a supporter of that roundtable and prepared documentation for that. But this is a global issue, and it's recognized in the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, it is seen as a core element of sound migration management. So indicator 10.7.1 specifically calls on governments to measure recruitment costs, and the ILO and the World Bank are together developing the methodology for member states to do this and to measure across corridors. We've also been called on by our governing body to use these guidelines in follow-up to the New York Declaration, which was adopted by the UN General Assembly in September. And notably, the New York Declaration contains provisions on labor migration, which include recruitment, workers' rights, and the participation of employers and workers' organization in dialogue. And they've agreed, importantly, that there would be 2 global compacts member states would adopt in 2018, one on refugees, but the other on migration. These will be the first compacts, and particularly for migration, will be the first compact ever adopted by UN heads of state at the General Assembly in 2018. So it's very important that ILO constituents play a significant role in the processes leading to the adoption of these, of the compacts, and that ILO constituents have an opportunity to provide their voice and support approaches and ILO standards in this process. Constituents in this region have a number of opportunities in which they can do that. We have a number of sub-regional dialogue processes ongoing, including in regional integration with ASEAN. And between Arab states and the Asian states, the upcoming Abu Dhabi dialogue will also be an important opportunity. I'd like to conclude by indicating that the ILO has presented another opportunity for you to provide your voice, and that is at the ILC's International Labor Conference General Discussion, which in 2017 will be dedicated to labor migration governance at the regional and bilateral level, and including recruitment. We know that this will be an opportunity for you to identify the actionable commitments that you would like to see in that global compact on migration, and the ILO is here to support you and look forward to collaborating with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Layton, Michelle. Now, let me turn to Mr. Phongsaysack. After this comprehensive and fact-based presentation by our colleague Michelle, since you chair the meeting of the senior labor official in the ASEAN, why don't you share with us what are your priorities and what has been done, especially in terms of the recruitment cost, and more broadly in terms of respect of the migrant workers' rights. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegation, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on behalf of ASEAN Senior Labor Official Meeting, or SLOM. As the chair of SLOM, I am very pleased to share with you what ASEAN has been doing to protect and promote the rights of migrant workers, especially with regard to recruitment. As we know that recruitment is a very critical stage of migrant or any employment, especially in the ever increasing fluidity of employment, characterized by increasing subcontracting, informality, flexibility. Recruitment is the stage where the type of work and working conditions, benefits and rights of workers are negotiated and defined. Recruitment that is fair, clear, transparent, abides by respect of human rights, law and labor standards, laid out a crowd toward fair employment. At the same time, more practices in recruitment often lead to exploitation and abuse of workers. Protection and promotion of the rights of migrant workers are high in ASEAN agenda. Almost 10 years ago, in 2007, ASEAN leaders signed the ASEAN Declaration on Protection and Promotion of the Rights of Migrant Workers, or we call Cebu Declarations. This declaration symbolizes common interests and top political commitment shared by our 10 countries. The Cebu Declaration recognizes the contribution of migrant workers to society and economy to both receiving and sending status. While the declaration respects sovereignty of member states to decide their own migration policies, it provides general principles: obligation of receiving status, obligation of sending status, and commitment by ASEAN with regard to protection and promotion of the rights of migrant workers, which are critical to fair migration. In terms of recruitment, the Cebu Declaration calls for sending states to set up policies and procedures to facilitate migration, including recruitment. It also calls for the establishment and promotion of legal practices to regulate recruitment of migrant workers and eliminate recruitment malpractices through legal and valid contract, regulation and accreditation of recruitment agencies, and blacklisting of negligent or unlawful agencies. For receiving status, the declaration calls for the facilitation of migrant workers' access to resources and remedies. It calls for the receiving status to provide fair and appropriate employment protection and provide migrant workers with adequate access to legal and jurisdiction system when they face discrimination, abuse, exploitation, and violence. The declaration also registers the commitment by ASEAN to promote decent, human, productive, dignified, and remunerative employment for migrant workers. The Cebu Declaration is not just a political statement. It is also the guidepost for our actions. One is the ongoing finalization of ASEAN instrument on the protection and promotion of the rights of migrant workers. The other is the work plan of the ASEAN Committee on the implementation of ASEAN Declaration on the protection and promotion of the rights of migrant workers, or ACMW. Let me share with you about the new ACMW work plan 2016-2020, which was adopted by the ASEAN Labour Ministers in May this year in Laos, PDR. The work plan is addressing 4 thematic areas which are transpired into activities and projects that ASEAN will work collectively together in these 5 years. The 4 thematic areas are governing mechanism of labor mobility, social protection and migrant workers, protection and promotion of the rights of migrant workers, and lastly is a labor dimension of trafficking in persons. In the past and throughout the previous ACMW work plan, ASEAN had several capacity building workshops on eliminating recruitment malpractices and on best practices in protecting migrant workers and forum on improving overseas employment administrations. Under this new work plan, there are many activities that will contribute to better recruitment system of migrant workers, such as ASEAN member states are working together to develop a compendium of safe migrant information in program in all 10 countries. ASEAN member states also continue to update repository of registration or a database in policy on migrant workers with information available to publics on ASEAN website. ASEAN will also conduct a research on migrant workers' right-based standards employment contract. Last but not least, each year, ASEAN government officials meet with regional and national social partners in civil societies to discuss issues on migrant workers. Them such as information service, in recruitment practice, in regulation were selected for our discussion in the past years. Ladies and gentlemen, ASEAN activities on recruitment of migrant workers concentrates very much on sharing of information and practices, exchange of views and capacity building. We are not yet at the stage where we establish regional standards for recruitment or regional standard employment contract, but it's not mean that we do not talk about it. In fact, there are many commonalities between what's raised and discussed among ASEAN member states and social partners in those activities that I mentioned in the general principles and guidelines for fair recruitment of ILO. On those, as statistics of UN says, majority of migrant workers in ASEAN are from all the ASEAN member states. ASEAN is the member of international society. We share many things with friends outside the regions. For one is our commitment to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. ASEAN leader also welcomes the Sustainable Development Goal and emphasized the complementarity between SDG and New ASEAN Vision 2025. As the member of international community, ASEAN would welcome opportunities to share our experiences and good practices. Some may be unique to us, and some may be similar to other regions in the global flora. As individual and member states are member of UN, we will, of course, participate in the discussion on migration at the UN level, including on Global Compact on migration. Because after all government and all other stakeholders, be it social partners, recruitment agencies, or business sector, should stand on one common ground, and that is the protection and promotion of the right of migrant workers. It is my information that I would like to share with you here. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Phongsaysack. You make several points, and I'm very curious. You insisted on the fact that room should be left to the national sovereignty in framing the rules or the regulations, and also at the end you came back by talking about the fact that the absence of a regional framework doesn't mean that you don't talk about it. Is it because you see some challenges in coming up with a regional framework, or simply is it a work in progress?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned about the nature of the instrument that we have established, because due to the differences we have in our regions, I think something we still could not the common instruments in that we can be a standard of religion. That's we respect to AMS to be their own policies and regulation on this. But we have to look at the international standards. It is our commitment that I mentioned that especially in the Cebu Declaration.
Thank you so much. Let me now turn to Dr. Alnuaimi, who is as we presented earlier, the Assistant Undersecretary in Ministry of Manpower and Human Resources in UAE. Maybe you want to address us from the perspective of receiving a country of destination and share your insight with us, please, Doctor. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to start by thanking the organizers for inviting me to join this distinguished panel. I'll be speaking from the perspective of the government of a country of destination on about labor recruitment practices. Let me frame my comments by first recalling some of the key drivers of the current practices, many of which result in the widespread of workers' abuse of the workers' right, including human and fundamental rights. First, we need to be clear that in most of our region's corridors, labor mobility takes place against the backdrop of a large imbalance between supply and demand. There are far more workers who aspire to migrate for employment than there are job opportunities. And quite often, those who are placed are selected because they are willing to pay more in illicit fees and kickbacks not because they are the most qualified for the jobs in question. And that creates the issue of skills mismatch, which creates challenges for the workers themselves, for the employers, and for the both countries of destination and countries of origin. Second, a sizable proportion of aspiring workers are poorly informed. They are indeed misled by their recruiters about available job opportunities, about the working conditions, and about the general conditions in the country of destination. And third, many employers in destination countries consider that a low-wage bill is what accounts for their firm's profitability and competitiveness. And therefore, they are driven to lower the cost of labor, using whatever means they have at their disposal, whether these means are legal or illegal. And in many countries of origin and destination, many of the government regulations of private recruitment agencies remain a high-level regulation. And it's very challenging for those governments to enforce those regulations. And the last one is that the business relation between the recruitment agencies and the employers is essentially non-transparent. And it's therefore likely to escape legal scrutiny. So to sum up, labor recruitment in our region has many structural flaws. And the underlying drivers of those flaws are the discrepancy between demand and supply, which is accentuated by the asymmetry of information about the job opportunities, the under-regulation of the employment agencies, the model of economic development that relies on the abundance of low-skilled, low-wage workers, and the poorly scrutinized or documented business relation between the employers and the recruitment agencies, which allows some to collude in the violation of the law without being held to account. Policy responses to reduce the incidence of abuse by addressing these structural flaws are beyond the scope of my comments today, but rather I'd like to focus on the last driver, namely the business relation between the recruitment agencies and the employers, that if left unchecked, is likely to raise the risk of abuse. So, absent a desire to adopt government-to-government recruitment schemes, what processes can be conceived, tested, and implemented that empower countries of origin and countries of destination in our corridor to collectively collaborate to ensure the transparency of the relation between employer and recruiter, and thereby enforcing the compliance with the national laws? And how can such process allow the governments to monitor the recruitment without high administrative cost? And what are the mutually agreed to responsibilities of each of the two governments in order to optimize the yield of such processes in terms of compliance? We in the UAE happen to be looking into developing such a model process in collaboration with a partner government of a country of origin. And there are models out there that can be leveraged and customized to our particular corridor. For example, one such model is the MOU between the Philippines and number of provisional governments in Canada. Another model is the Musanid system model between Saudi Arabia and Bangladesh. So there are models out there that can be leveraged and customized and expanded between the governments of origin and governments of destination. And in a nutshell, the model that we are conceiving or thinking about is a flow process of recruitment that mandates the standardization and detailing of the letter of demand. Then that letter of demand gets transferred between the two governments of origin and destination. And then the selection of candidates and the ultimate placement are also subject to the government's oversight. Let me stop here, and perhaps maybe I'll offer some more points later in the discussion. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alnuaimi, and also being concise and sticking to the time as you promised. I really appreciate this. Let me turn to Professor Jureidini, who has done a lot of research, and I know you are again doing it both on both angles, be it country of origin or country of destination within countries and different sectors. So we're looking forward to hear from you, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. Dr. Nuaimi's comments cut through many of the things that I was going to say, and I'm in full agreement with him. But my approach is just slightly different. I think that what I want to say is that the first step for the reform of the recruitment process is for both countries of destination and countries of origins governments to make a commitment together and to show the political will to fair and ethical recruitment with the objective of eliminating all worker payments for recruitment in line with the ILO Convention 181. This is not to say merely to look at the reducing the costs of recruitment to migrant workers, but to eliminate all costs. And all stakeholders in migrant labour recruitment should really ask themselves why that they accept and require, in many instances, that the poorest, low-skilled, low-income migrant workers, or those in low-skill or low-income jobs, are the ones required to pay the excessive charges that amount to up to a year or more of their salaries, when the vast majority of higher skilled workers do not. What are the reasons for eliminating the worker payments? Firstly, the charges levied on prospective migrant workers are generally well in excess of the actual recruitment fees, commissions, and administrative costs which employers normally pay. And this is the source of the funds that I would argue feeds fraudulent activity, or dare I say, corruption, throughout the industry. That fraudulent activity includes kickback bribery or extortion, payments to the personnel of employing companies in countries of destination. These secretive and fraudulent payments amount to billions of dollars that has tarnished the reputations of both the sending and receiving countries throughout Asia and the Arab world. And it is one of the main elements in the charge of modern-day slavery. Secondly, the money also goes to funding expenses of employer personnel to origin countries for skills testing and candidate selection, as well as extortionary payments for officials and other intermediaries for paperwork and travel in countries of origin. And despite these costs to workers, or perhaps because of them, there is often skills mismatching, which has often been mentioned here so far already. And that leads to dissatisfaction for both workers and employers. Now, this does not assume that the senior executives and directors of the employing corporations are aware of these fraudulent practices, but in a mature market, they certainly should. Secondly, worker payments put them into debt and trap them into accepting less favourable wages and conditions than originally promised. This, in turn, places them into situations of debt bondage and forced labour, much of which can also be classified as human trafficking for labour exploitation, violating both local and international law. Third, because low-skilled workers pay employers for jobs, employers profit from recruitment. This has driven an excessive supply of low-skilled labour and less use of technology, particularly in the construction sectors. What are the steps to eliminate these charges to low-skilled workers? First, we need to change the culture of workers expecting to pay for obtaining their jobs abroad. This requires governments in countries of origin to repeal current regulations that allow private recruitment agencies to charge migrant workers. Recruitment agencies charging migrant workers should be made illegal and punishable by law. Awareness-raising programs in countries of origin should make it clear to prospective migrant workers that it is illegal for them to pay recruitment agencies. This can be done by a comprehensive media campaign, including television and social media, as well as in job advertisements and contracts. Secondly, we need to change the culture of employers expecting not to pay the costs of labour recruitment. This begins with reforming the actual tendering process for projects in countries of destination, where companies assume that they do not have to pay recruitment costs in order to be more commercially competitive. This creates a disadvantage to ethical companies who do include labour recruitment costs. Project tenders, especially in construction, cleaning and other services, should include a separate, transparent labour recruitment cost analysis within the bidding proposal that details variable and fixed costs of recruitment, including the labour costs of subcontractors down the supply chain. The lowest price bids should be carefully scrutinised for evidence of charging workers. And these companies, particularly the lead companies, need to audit their own human resource and procurement departments for legal compliance. Currently, we also know that where employers do pay, recruitment agencies in countries of origin can still charge workers, so they get from both sides, because workers still expect to pay. Foreign companies operating in Arab states can also be prosecuted for such actions under other legislation, for example, making lead contractors liable for recruitment abuses in their global supply chains. This has been the focus of legislation in the UK, in the European Union, the United States, and indeed OECD countries. Thirdly, bilateral and multilateral agreements should be developed between countries of origin and countries of destination that specify that the supply of labour at no cost to migrant workers. For this, both countries of origin and countries of destination must make their laws on recruitment consistent. There needs to be coordination in legislation and enforcement. For example, currently, countries of origin allow various charges to workers. But in Qatar, UAE, and KSA, for example, the law prohibits it. These discrepancies have allowed the current fraudulent activities to occur unabated. Countries of destination should insist that they will only issue work visas to workers who have not paid recruitment agencies and arrive in the country debt-free. And I know that some measures are underway in order to do this. In this sense, to reduce the number of intermediaries, increased government-to-government labour recruitment is also to be encouraged, which would set benchmarks for the private sector. Fourthly, there should be collaboration between countries of origin and destination to set fair maximum recruitment fees or commissions to private recruitment agencies, and to calculate the fixed costs of recruitment to make them transparent and regulated for all stakeholders. Here, it is important to keep the records of enforcement to show progress and to act as a deterrent that affects behavioural and cultural change. This should be accompanied by awareness-raising campaigns in countries of destination aimed at employers, stating that the actual fixed costs of recruitment and indicating that any cost above this amount is a profit margin for the recruiter. It's important to note that this should not be seen as interfering with the competition of the marketplace, but rather for the protection of the most vulnerable migrant workers. Fifthly, establish training and accreditation programs is essential to develop more trustworthy recruitment agencies dealing with low-skilled migrant workers. Fair, ethical and compliant recruitment agencies should become not just the preferred labour suppliers, but the exclusive labour suppliers. Such recruiters will be more attuned also to the addressing of the current skills mismatching. Well, what are the benefits? For employers, the minimisation of reputation risks, reduction of the fraudulent activities, improvement of productivity, socially responsible business practices, and contributions to a more socially just society. For agencies, its fair and ethical recruitment will produce less competition with economies of scale. It's already been proven that fair and ethical recruitment is commercially viable. For employees, labour rights and freedom of movement will be much easier to achieve, and it will eliminate or at least reduce the debt bondage and forced labour. For country of origin governments, the elimination of hundreds of millions of dollars which are repatriated to countries of destination will be an important part of their economies. There will be less abuse of nationals abroad and compliance with international standards. Lastly, for countries of destination, it means the reduction of fraudulent behaviour, more content employees and increased productivity, compliance with international standards, improved reputation, and enforcement of the law will be far easier with a no charge to workers policy. In conclusion, it's reasonable to accept that, is it reasonable to accept that charges to low-skilled or low-income migrant workers is merely a market mechanism for low-skilled workers to obtain jobs abroad because the oversupply of workers and under demand? There are all kinds of laws that regulate markets and to punish fraudulent activities. Charges to workers are bribery, in my view, bribery and extortion, and these are crimes. They are not supposed to be the business norm. My argument is that reform and regulation of recruitment in the international labour market where workers do not pay is a basic and fundamental requirement that should be implemented as quickly as possible to stamp out the corruption and for the enforcement of the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Professor, especially the very clear conclusion that you draw, which I'm sure Ms. Layton will come back in terms of how ILO perceive that in moving forward. Let me now turn to the floor for possible interventions. And I understand the colleague from the employers and the workers have asked I can recognize Mr. Farouk, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Migration is considered to be beneficial for most of the countries involved, since it usually means higher economic growth for countries of destination, increased wages for migrants, and benefits in terms of remittances for countries of origin. The majority of labor migration in this region is facilitated and regulated primarily by national migration systems. Having clear and transparent national migration laws and policies that do not hinder the free movement of labor are greatly beneficial for all the stakeholders. Labor market protection and national laws are at risk when such systems are changed in regular frequencies. Unfortunately, there are only a limited number of governments that have well-regulated systems facilitating the legal and transparent movement of low or semi-skilled workers. This is the stage where the low-skilled workers aspiring to secure jobs abroad become prone to abusive recruitment practices like debt bondage, forced labor, and human trafficking carried out by unregulated intermediaries. Besides, there are existence of third parties which exploit and complicate the situation, resulting exorbitantly high migration cost. Under any circumstances, the employers group feels that any undue cost must not be borne by migrant or potential migrant workers. Risk of unforeseen links to forced labor, child labor, or human trafficking cannot be mitigated by exercising fair recruitment practices only. Ensuring transparency in the labor supply chain is extremely essential. As ILO constituents, these issues must be addressed with proper care. I would like to mention the example of Philippines. They have various initiatives such as the 2003 Anti-Human Trafficking Act. We advocate such initiatives at a wider scale. We need more government actions at national, regional, and multinational levels. But experience says that there has been a tendency of local and national regulations becoming ineffective, allowing non-compliant actors to take advantage. These need to be prevented through various initiatives like Fair Recruitment Initiative and the IRIS initiative of ethical recruitment, etc. Ensuring fair recruitment is not an easy task. The major challenges, among others, include lack of clear guidance as well as enforcement of laws or legislations. Cases of abuse and workers being unaware of their rights are also issues that must be considered. We also need to focus on the role of the social partners. Both workers and employers' organizations should be strict in advocating as well as implementing fair recruitment practices. Need for awareness raising and social dialogues must be emphasized. EO to EO communication should be established to exchange useful information. In order to ensure fair recruitment process, many companies and industry have their own code of conduct. The World Employment Federation, previously known as the Confederation of Private Employment Agencies, or Sept, has its own code of conduct to promote ethical recruitment. Its work with IOE, ITUC, and the ILO has also led to the launch of the Fair Recruitment Initiative, which aims to prevent human trafficking, promote safe migration, and reduce the cost of labor mobility. The role of IOE has been pivotal in the International Recruitment Integrity System initiative. The chances of fair recruitment is greatly facilitated when companies commit to fair recruitment principles and self-regulation mechanisms like CIT Code of Conduct or IRIS, etc. At the recently concluded ILO meeting of experts on ILO Guidelines for Ethical Recruitment, ILO has already come up with the general principles to orient implementation of fair recruitment at all levels. In addition to supporting the implementation of these guiding principles, ILO needs to support the member states to analyze the need for labor market, identify the gaps, and take effective steps for free movement of workers across the region. ILO should also play a significant role in providing capacity building and technical assistance to its constituents in promoting fair recruitment. In this regard, ILO can assist to establish jointly collaborated training centers with mutually acceptable certification system. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end, I would like to mention that, like the opportunities, we have many challenges as well in the field of fair migration and recruitment. And only with your help, we'll be able to meet them head-on and come out as winners. Thank you all.
I thank the distinguished delegate from the employers group in Bangladesh, Mr. Farouk Ahmed. I recognize, I believe, Nepal. Yeah, from the worker side, Mr. Ramesh Padal. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I am Ramesh Badal, representative of the General Federation of Nepalese Trade Unions from Nepal. On the issue of the labor migration, let me allow to quote the ILO DG report that international labor migration offers a triple win. I think it should be the triple win. However, the reality is not matched with the report. In fact, there is a single win, which is the country of destination. I support the aim must be the triple win. Matter relating to the exploitation and inequality always left the workers behind to be a winner. It may be the win for the migrant workers if they are treated equally in the country of destinations. If the migrant workers are covered under the national legislation by the country of destination, most of the country, they denied even to recognize the agriculture workers and domestic workers as workers. If they receive the same wage as of the native workers, and if they must reciprocate their skills and work to the wage, and then only we can create the winning situation. If they are protected equally by the social protection system of the country of the destination, most of the country, they denied to protect the migrant workers through their social protection system. Most of the migrant workers, they denied from the proper information. If they provide the proper information before leaving the country regarding their wage, working condition, culture, and other related matters, and that helps to the migrant workers to decide whether they want to go that particular country or not. If the labor migration system also cover under the labor inspection system of the country of the destinations, then it helps to bring the victim of the migrant workers from the difficult situations. Similarly, the migrant workers can be the winner if they can remit their earnings through the proper channel, and if the workers are free from the recruitment fee and related cost. Similarly, if they are access to seek the justice, free and fair manner, including exit in case they want to resign from the job. And most importantly, if they have the right to organize and bargain collectively is the most important things. In fact, after all, migrant workers may win if they have the decent work. Before that, recruiting process itself needs to improve. We must ensure fair recruitment. All recruitment agencies must be monitored and held liable in case of the violation of the labor rights. In addition to that, migrant workers even more exploited through the supply chain in this context. The principal employer held responsible for all misconduct done by its subcontractor and labor supplier. However, now, majority of the migrant workers do not achieve these rights, thus we could not term as win for the migrant workers. To ensure right of the migrant workers, we must comply the recently adopted the fair recruitment guidelines and procedures as well. It is also not the win for the country of origin. It only can sustain by the remittance, but could not develop. Sending country, they invest heavy amount for the education, skill development for the youth. Invest the sick migrant returnees if it is even lifelong time. Invest a lot to protect the disabled migrant workers, those who injured in the country of destination. Invest to take care of the dependent child and spouse in case they died abroad. However, poor country investing a lot, but destination country only consuming fresh-blooded youth without investing anything. Thus, we can ensure triple win if the country of destination compensates the social cost and share fair portion of the revenue generated by the migrant workers to the development of the country of origin. As a union delegates, I have concern on the right to organize and collective bargaining. Most of the receiving country use suppressive measures against the workers. They are send the workers to the jail and even deported to the country of origin. Thus, such practice must be stopped. Workers even exploited because of the competition between country to country to supply the workers. Thus, regional governmental institutions like SAARC, ASEAN should fix the minimum standard of wage and other standard before recruitment of the migrant workers to send country of destination. There is the questions always raised that this problem can be solved by the government-to-government agreement. However, in my opinion, it can help to overcome from this situation if it must be transparent, it must be prepared in the transparent manner, if it must be accessible to the workers, if it must be enforced by the country of destination by the court, then only workers can be treated as the winner. Thank you very much.
Mr. Badal from Nepal, speaking on behalf of the workers group from Nepal. I thank you for your intervention. I wonder if we have others. Now we have, of course, we have the employers have spoken as well as the workers. I don't know if other participants, delegate, distinguished delegate, wish to take the floor. I recognize Malaysia. Please present yourself. I will really ask you, if you don't mind, to really be 2 minutes because we have 8 minutes to close. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Malaysian Employers Federation believes and supports fully the policy on fairer migration. Fairer migration means that the workers need to be facilitated to move from the source country to the receiving country. The current system of migration does not seem to support and facilitate the movement of workers. The cost of movement is too high, and most of the cost can be attributed to the involvement of the third-party agents. MEF believes that the involvement of third-party agents, whether at the source country or at the receiving country, should be minimized and eventually eliminated. The movement of workers from the source country to the receiving country should be on government-to-government basis, and in doing so, the cost of movement can be reduced by 2/3. We should not continue the system of doing business on migration of workers. Another critical factor on fairer migration is on the recognition of skills of migrant workers. Recognition of skills will benefit both employers and workers, as workers will be able to command better pay and employers will benefit from higher productivity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your intervention. I recognize I cannot see the country. Could you please present yourself?
I'm J. Solomon from the Malaysian TUC. Fair migration is a dire issue to be addressed urgently today. An estimated 244 million international migrants and 740 million internal migrants are in search of decent employment and better livelihoods. They continue to be employed without labor rights, right to form or be part of trade unions, right to collective bargaining, decent wages, livelihood, and social protection. They are, among others, often subject of extreme exploitation by labor contractors for greed to benefit from the levy paid to the workers, by the workers, suppressed wages, and lawlessness. We have been speaking of this for many years, but now it's time we looked at actions to be taken. Thus, we cannot adjourn and leave this APRM without making conclusions on this important issue. We must make a decision to, 1, stop legitimization of labor contractors in both sending and receiving countries. Migrant workers and their employers must be legitimized and registered. 2, sending and receiving country tripartite system must work together for the migrant workers and provide the workers access to labor rights, unionization, right to collective bargaining, and social protection. 3, tripartite machinery of both sending and receiving country must monitor employment of migrant. The real need to hire them must be justified, and they should not be abandoned or left to work with inferior contracts instead of the bright future they were promised. The above is a suggestion for immediate action. This may not resolve all issues on migration, but will naturally reduce the present despicable conditions reported every day currently. If we, making up this noble house, do not ensure we work together to provide the safety nets for the migrant workers, then we are definitely guilty of condoning the inhuman torture, suffering, and even death of the migrant worker who are fellow human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your intervention. Now I'm going to turn to the panel members, and I will really have to be impolite by asking you to stick to literally 1 minute and 1 minute 60 seconds. Maybe we start with you, Professor Jureidini.
Thank you, and I apologize for going over before. Really, I think that what I would like to convey is that there are many ways in which the practice of charging low-skilled migrant workers such incredible fees for the jobs that they take abroad needs to be understood. There are many euphemisms or ways of using other language instead of the language of bribery and extortion and corruption. For example, they use words like sweeteners or contributions. A favorite one with the Rolls-Royce Corporation is that they are simply facilitation costs, but they are bribery in any other terms, or leakage. And I want to change this issue of the cost of migration to be clear that the cost of migration and the reduction of the cost of migration should be the reduction of the cost of migration for employers, not for employees, instead of the assumption that we need to reduce the cost of migration or recruitment for workers. It should not be for workers, it should be eliminated for workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Let me turn to Dr. Alnuaimi, please.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to point to that several countries of origin and countries of destination are looking into alternative models to the current recruitment model. And within the Abu Dhabi dialogue, countries are working on several initiatives. For example, on an initiative on leveraging skilling and skill certification to address some of the challenges related to the recruitment and to the recruitment costs. Another one is how to leverage technology to support cooperative labor market governance. So I'd like to invite you to attend the senior officials meeting and the ministerial meeting of Abu Dhabi dialogue that would take place in Colombo in late January. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And let me pass the floor to Mr. Phongsaysack, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In conclusion, I would like to say this. If we compare with the issues we have been facing, I think, especially in our region and in our national review also, we are in the beginning step to fight with these problems. That what we must to do in the future, I think in globally, I agree that we have to continue to change experiences and best practices and recognize real situation on migrant workers and set up global system and mechanisms is more useful. In regionally, especially in ASEAN, of course, we have to continue to establish much more appropriate and useful for a platform and mechanism for our region. And we have to finalize any instrument that we have start together. And lastly, is about international level. We have to set up model system and regulation for our people, especially about the labor force and migrant workers. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Phongsaysack, thank you. Let me now ask Michelle Layton, Dr. Alnuaimi, just to make a reference to the Abu Dhabi dialogue that is happening in Colombo later in 2 months from now or a month from now in January. From ILO perspective, how do we see the way forward? Let's conclude on that. Michelle, please.
Thank you very much. I think this has been a rich discussion. We've heard very clearly that the way recruitment is organized, managed, and monitored has really profound effects on the treatment of migrant workers, not only their higher risk of trafficking and forced labor, but their payment of high debts of their family, the fact that they have poorer wages and working conditions when they pay fees than not. And we really have to begin to look at these very seriously and eliminate these costs. ILO constituents, I think, have spoken very clearly that we need a framework, and that framework has now been adopted. The guidelines on fair recruitment, adopted in September, really do provide a framework and a way forward. I think now the question is how we act and act together, because we need a very strong set of cooperation between destination and countries of origin, but a lot more can be done in the regional context. There is an opportunity for us with the Global Compact negotiations, with the regional discussions that our colleagues have mentioned, and right now it's time for the ILO constituents to get more engaged in these processes, and the ILO is here to support you. Thank you very much, and you can find the guidelines here up on the screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So let me take 10 seconds to thank all the panel members, and also to for your questions and comment, which, as Michelle has said, we register very well in shaping the way forward. Thank you once again. Adjourned.